Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Dan and Joe Sports Show. As always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.
Joe, we're coming off what has to be the greatest weekend we've ever seen of divisional round playoff football in the NFL. Every single game came down to the wire. I've never seen it like that before. You had walk-off field goals by three of the teams, and you had 3 out of 4 games end up being massive upsets where the road underdog won. And then the only one where you had the favorite win, they won in extremely improbable fashion. And let's begin with that one. The Chiefs-Bills game, it may go down as the greatest football game in the history of the NFL. I think you can make that argument, especially if the Chiefs go on to win the Super Bowl, because I listened to this game on the radio, but I just got the feel from listening to the Bills broadcast about what was going on. I think these were the two teams that are the best teams in the NFL. And you and I talked about this last week. I kind of forecasted the winner of this game to be my favorite to win the Super Bowl. And it definitely played out like that. I mean, what a titanic matchup of quarterbacks just playing at their absolute best. Josh Allen, excellent performance, made a lot of clutch moves, some good runs. Then hit a receiver that I had never heard of in Gabriel Davis for 4 touchdowns. And then, of course, Pat Mahomes rips your heart out with going 65 yards in 13 seconds to get that last second field goal to tie the game before they won it in overtime.
Yes. And I'll actually start there, kind of giving you my thoughts. I really like the fact that the Chiefs did not try to return that kickoff, because I see too many teams sometimes try to do that in that situation, and they burn valuable seconds. And a lot of times they'll actually lose yardage on the kickoff coverage. So like the fact that Mecole Hardman just, took the knee and then let Mahomes have the full 13 seconds. Because in this day and age, it's so tough on these defenses to stop these quarterbacks from getting in field goal range. Now, don't get me wrong. With 13 seconds, I didn't think there was any chance. But still, I would much rather, like Mahomes' chances over just about anybody to pull that off with his arm strength and talented pedigree. And so, just kind of like, a microcosm of what, like you said, was just an unbelievable classic game. You kind of come away feeling like this is one of the new rivalries, if it already wasn't, of quarterbacks with Mahomes and Allen after they've now faced off in the playoffs in consecutive years.
Yeah, you kind of feel like Mahomes and Allen is taking over for Mahomes and Brady in the AFC. Because you remember Mahomes had to climb the Tom Brady wall before he ever got to the Super Bowl. And then ultimately, I think the first time that they won the Super Bowl, they didn't even have to play the Patriots because they got taken care of a little earlier. And then Tom Brady moved over to the NFC, and Mahomes never got to take him on until he played him in the Super Bowl and still didn't beat him. And so now you feel like the AFC rivalry is gone from Brady and Mahomes to now Mahomes being the wily veteran taking on Josh Allen. And that's 2 years in a row they've had just excellent games. And, one of the takeaways that I have from this, Joe, and I want to get your thoughts on it, do you think that this is the game that's going to change the NFL playoff, the NFL overtime format to go to more like it is in college? Because it really felt so incredibly unfair that Josh Allen didn't get a chance to go down and score any points because of the way he was commanding that offense, and that game really did come down to a coin flip.
I think there's a good chance you'll see that changed. I hope that it is changed. I also hope, in the regular season that they can do something to prevent ties, because I just don't like ties personally. I want to see some type of outcome, some type of result at the end. So, yeah, I think there's a good chance we'll see a move, but you just never know, with the commissioner's office.
No, I mean, the NFL tends to do things that always make us mad, and things that are good changes, like where they looked at pass interferences and you could review it, they got rid of it within 2 seasons. I mean, it's just insane. So, I mean, here's what my thought is, Joe. If you're listening, Roger Goodell, which, you don't tend to listen to anybody that you care about, so that's fine. Make a 7.5-minute quarter. So 1/2 of one quarter, whoever scores the most points in 7.5 minutes wins. Just make it really simple. You want to talk about player safety and all this kind of garbage. Well, you know what? A lot of times the regular overtime goes longer than that. So why don't you do that? And then if you have to extend it to the next one, then you do that. But 7.5 minutes, and that I think that would be good. It wouldn't extend games that much. That should be enough time for both teams to get a chance to possess the ball. And I just kind of think that would be a good way to do it.
No, I kind of like that. I heard a lot of people talking about the college rules, but also heard somebody like yourself talking about just making it an overtime period where it's not sudden death. And, that's what we have in basketball. We have 5 minutes that they play, and whoever has the most points at the end of that period wins. And I just think it makes sense.
I think it's a lot more fair. And I even like the system that I propose better than this goofy 2-point conversion thing they switched to in college. I used to love the college overtime, but I don't like the new ideation of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
because there's something exciting sometimes about how long it's going to go.
Yeah, exactly. And so, going back to that game, I'm sure there's a lot of people that'll play devil's advocate with me and say, well, Daniel, the Bills should have stopped them with 13 seconds left. They should have, but they still had to fight to get that lead back to begin with great touchdowns by Josh Allen, 2-point conversions. And, I don't know how many people listening thought the same thing, but in my mind, I thought that there was at least a 50-50 chance that Mahomes would get them a field goal. And by that, I mean get them a field goal opportunity. I thought maybe it would be something more like a 60-plus yard field goal. But, I wasn't thinking it was more likely that he would get them the actual points. And once I heard that he got it like within 48 yards, I was like, that guy's definitely going to make that field goal.
Yeah, there's something just about Mahomes. You feel like he's just going to give his team a chance. And just the way the whole weekend had played out, you just didn't feel like it was over just yet.
No, and, Arrowhead Stadium is one of the best home crowd environments in the NFL. It's a place where a lot of magic happens, especially since Mahomes has been there. And that's just, with the weapons that he has, and with especially someone like Tyreek Hill that can extend the field so long, you knew that they had a chance to get it back very quickly. And at the end of that game, even though this hasn't been the best Chiefs offense, you saw their 3 stars, that being Mahomes, Kelsey, and Tyreek Hill, really shine out, and they all did great things.
Right. Now they get to host, the AFC Championship game because Tennessee lost, and they have a prime opportunity to win a second championship in 3 years.
That's right, and they're definitely the heavy favorites to do it. Well, let's look at their opponent, Joe. The Titans come in this season being the number 1 overall seed in the playoffs. I got to give myself credit. I was 4 for 4 on picking these games last weekend, and this one I especially knocked down. That was the Bengals upset over the Titans. And if you look at it, what a weird game. Joe Burrow gets sacked 9 times, and they still come out on top. And you know why? Because even with being sacked 9 times, he outdueled the other quarterback because Tannehill threw 3 interceptions, including the one on the last drive when the Titans were driving to win the game, and instead threw a pick that gave the Bengals a field goal for themselves to win it. So really epic collapse by Tennessee at home. And, great win for the Bengals, who, and really in Joe Burrow's first season being the starting quarterback for the majority of it, already find themselves in the NFC Championship, the AFC Championship game.
Right. They're a year or two ahead, and just great for them, to break that playoff curse the week earlier and just kind of continue the run here. But yeah, you felt like as porous as Cincinnati's offensive line played, they scored enough points because Tennessee helped keep them in the game with the turnovers from Tannehill. I mean, even the first play from scrimmage of the game for Tennessee was an interception thrown by Ryan Tannehill. And that just kind of personified the whole game for Tennessee. The turnovers just really impacted the result.
That's right. And, they got Derrick Henry back, but it wasn't the Derrick Henry that we know and love. They got a Derrick Henry that was maybe 60-70% of what he could be. And that's a factor, but that doesn't explain 3 interceptions. The Bengals defense played excellent, and Joe Burrow, gutted it out and withstood 9 sacks to win the game. But you know what the biggest stat is for Joe Burrow while getting sacked 9 times? 0 turnovers. Because you know what? That's a lot of opportunities to fumble the ball. And Joe just showed that toughness that you saw at LSU and his wisdom by knowing if it's not there and I can't throw it away, I'm going to take it and I'm not going to lose the football. So that's what ended up winning the game is you got a quarterback that really took care of the football quite well.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely has done that. We talked about Sean Payton in an earlier podcast, kind of reinventing the perception of that franchise with the Saints, with Breeze. Burrow and Taylor have kind of quickly done that with the Bengals in 2 years.
That's right. And, they got a big task coming up against the Chiefs, which we'll preview when we get to championship weekend. All right, Joe, now let's move over to the NFC. And the first one that we want to talk about there is, the Rams getting this huge lead against the Bucs. I remember I was hunting and I was watching it in the hunting stand, and I saw that they had gotten up. It was 27-3. And I was like, well, if anybody could come back from 27-3, it's Tom Brady. But this one maybe feels like it's a little too much. And that was funny. I texted our friend of the show, Kyle, who's a big Georgia fan, and I said, well, this is really the dog's year, isn't it? Matt Stafford's about to beat Tom Brady. Maybe he's going to win a Super Bowl now, too, that you've seen Georgia win the national championship. And then all of a sudden, Tom Brady starts coming back. And they get it to 27-13, and they miss a 4th and 1. And all of a sudden, the Rams have the ball back, and they have a field goal that's I think it's like a 45-yard field goal. And I was like, all right, well, if he makes this, obviously the game's over. But that was my mind. I was like, but if he misses this, I think Tom Brady's going to at least tie this up. And sure enough, the guy misses it. And then Tom Brady gets to 2 touchdowns really quickly. And I'm like, oh, man, the Rams really blew this one. And then, just an amazing play to Cooper Kupp by Stafford. And I still to this day have no idea how Cooper Kupp got that wide open on that play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And a few observations there. Kind of similar to the Tennessee game, it was self-inflicted largely in the second half for the Rams. They had a lot of turnovers that helped Tampa Bay come back in the game. Obviously, still credit to Brady and company for capitalizing, but that definitely played a factor. And I think, had the Rams lost, this would have been a loss the franchise would have never recovered from with the current nucleus of players. But on that last sequence where Kupp got wide open with the pass from Stafford, I was really impressed how the Rams were able to kind of flip the script coming out of just the emotional letdown of letting the game get tied. They didn't just play for overtime. They went for it there. And I've seen too many teams kind of be too conservative there and play for overtime after giving up a big lead in those types of situations. And who knows, if they get to overtime, if the Buccaneers win the coin flip, they're going to win the game. I think there's no doubt about that. And so credit the Rams, for being aggressive there.
Absolutely, Joe. I mean, what you got to do, and this is what Auburn didn't do against Alabama, is when you blow the big lead, you have to be aggressive and win the game right then and there. Because the other team's got the momentum. In this case, they're the defending Super Bowl champions. You don't want to give them that overtime to beat you. Right now, they're the ones that are hitting on all cylinders. So you want to end the game right then and there. And that's what the Rams did. I love the play call. It worked. And now they're sitting there in the NFC Championship game, and Tom Brady is contemplating his future.
Yeah, and the Rams are going to get to host the title game. And if they win that, they'll host the Super Bowl too.
That's right. And let's talk about who they're going to play. And this is a very familiar NFC Championship opponent. That's the 49ers. And, Joe, I called this upset as well. You talked about it a lot last week too. The Packers are not great at home in the playoffs. I don't understand why, because you would think that with the weather up there, that would be the biggest advantage they could possibly have. And the weather did everything that you could want in that game. It was snowing. It was 0 degrees with wind chill. I mean, everything's set up for, man, this is Packers football. And instead you saw this is Packers playoff football under Aaron Rodgers, and they lost the game. And they lost a game in which they probably had 2 to 3 times as many yards as the 49ers. Their defense played outstanding. I felt like Rashawn Gary was in the backfield hitting Jimmy G like every play. And yet, at the end of the game, the Packers lost. And it wasn't because of their defense. Their offense didn't do great. But ultimately, that third layer of the game we barely ever talk about, special teams, made all the difference in the world for the 49ers. Blocks punt for a touchdown, their only touchdown of the game. Blocks field goal. And Joe, I think that the biggest play or the biggest sequence in that game, 49ers are driving to get their first points of the game. They get stopped near the goal line by the Packers, what I thought was a huge play. And then right after that, Aaron Rodgers hits like an 85-yard pass to get the Packers down back in the 49ers red zone. When you thought the 49ers were going to tie the game up right at the end of the first half, suddenly the Packers have a chance to get up by 2 scores, and then their offense sizzles out, and the 49ers block the field goal. And I thought that ultimately, when you look back at what ended up happening in this game, I thought that was the biggest sequence of the entire game.
That was huge. That was pivotal, to your point. And I would also add that, it was the type of game with the weather when you're a team like the Packers that's heavily favored. You want to come out and bury the opponent early. You don't want to let them hang around. And we know all too well the 49ers are that kind of franchise that is just kind of in their DNA to make these games close, to kind of win ugly football. And so as the snow started to fall, like that kind of played like right into the 49ers' hands with the kind of conditions that helped them, I think, win this game and, stifle the Packers' offense in the second half. But the weird statistic here, Dan, is that Aaron Rodgers is now 0-4 in his postseason career against the San Francisco 49ers, the team that obviously did not draft him number 1 overall.
And his hometown team, too. I think he's from just outside of San Francisco in California. And obviously he played at Cal Berkeley, which is within the metro area of San Francisco. So a lot of weird things like adding up to that strange Ofer stat that he has there.
Yeah. And, as much as, we want to ridicule the Niners for not taking him, there's a franchise they're like, well, we beat him every time we play him. So it's kind of like that's interesting to me.
Well, and, I guess since he's been there, they've been in the Super Bowl. They've had all that success against them. And who knows, they might be there again this year. And Joe, like, how often do you see a quarterback win a playoff game with 90 yards passing?
I can't remember the last time that happened. It's actually hard for me to remember the last time somebody did it with even like in the hundreds much. Like it's usually like 200 or more these days.
That's right. And, that was definitely like the most 49ers thing ever. And you're right, Joe. I mean, you could see in the first half, the reason that I thought that sequence was so big was that the Packers had so many chances to extend their lead out, to get up by 2 scores. And you kind of felt like if the Packers could get up by 2 scores, the game would be out of reach because the 49ers were having so many struggles on offense. And when they just never kept doing it, when it got to be about the middle of the third quarter, I was like, I still think the 49ers are somehow going to win this game. And they did, because the Packers never could put the nail in the coffin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just didn't put them away, let them hang around. They did what they do. And I still can't believe that Robbie Gould is still kicking. Well, Mason Crosby too. Both those guys have been, in the NFL for over 15 years. In Gould, I remember him back, with the Bears back in the day, taking on Sean Payton in the playoffs.
That's right. Yeah, Robbie Gould's been there a long time, and that's who I associate him with, is the Bears. Well, Joe, moving forward, let's stay in the NFC and let's look at that matchup first. Rams and 49ers. Who do you got in this one?
I'm going to lean with the Rams. The big stat they've got to get past is the fact that psychologically, similar to Aaron Rodgers against the Niners, they've lost six consecutive games to their arch rivals in the Niners. And so they got to get past that hurdle. I think they've got a good chance at home, on the strength of their defense, of course, with so many playmakers. The pass rush is so relentless. But Stafford and Kupp, have a lot of confidence right now. They're just playing great football. I think that they gained kind of an extra layer of resiliency, being able to, withstand the game against Tampa Bay and not give up that game and win it the way they did. But I do feel like it's going to be a very close game. I think of the two matchups, it's the more entertaining game down the stretch. It kind of reminds a bit of Grudge Fest in 2013, also an NFC West matchup when the 49ers battled the Seahawks in the NFC Championship game, and Seattle narrowly won that, kind of finally got over the hump. I think it's going to be a little bit kind of like that for the Rams over the Niners.
Yeah, Joe, I think this is going to be a really, really tough old school football game. Whatever the under is, I'd take the under on this one. I'm going to go ahead and give you my lock of the week. This is going to be very low scoring. And I think you're right. I think the biggest thing for the Rams coming in was how gutty that performance was at the end. You blow a 24-point lead against the GOAT, against Tom Brady. And instead of going into overtime and laying down and dying like everybody expected you to, you hit this big play and you make a last-second field goal to win the game. And I think that adds a lot of confidence, especially when you're taking on a team like the 49ers that is so confident in close games. They can win games against the Packers they had no business even being in the way they played, who came back against 21 points down in the fourth quarter against your own team a couple weeks ago. And so I think that if the Rams had just won that game, maybe coasted and won by like 10 points against the Bucs, I probably would favor the 49ers right now. But I think that added layer of determination and focus and belief that the Rams got from being able to weather that Tom Brady storm gives them a little bit of an edge here. And so I think that the 49ers are going to make this a tough game. They might make another comeback. But I think the Rams, with it being at home and being a generally more talented team than the 49ers with their added confidence, make it close. I'm going to say it's low scoring though, Joe. I like the Rams to win this one 20-17.
No, actually, that was a score count I was thinking about too, like 20-17, 17-14, really low scoring. Kind of comes down, just maybe a field goal at the end. It just feels like, this is the kind of matchup I think the NFL is enticed by, because I think the NFL would just salivate at having the Rams host a Super Bowl since they've been trying to kind of build football back in LA.
Oh, absolutely. They want this. They love seeing the Rams getting to host an NFC Championship game. And if they get to host a Super Bowl, even all the better for them. But that's definitely, in terms of the things that could have happened in the NFC last week, I think this is the thing that the NFL would have loved to see. Plus, the 49ers are a classic franchise. I mean, I know the NFL is different than college sports when you talk about blue bloods. But when I think of the blue bloods in the NFL, there's basically four teams that come to mind. You got the Steelers, you got the Cowboys, you have the Patriots, and then the last one is the 49ers. And so I think you're getting to see one of the blue bloods taking on the Rams in their stadium. And I think that that's just a really exciting matchup.
No, it really is. I think it'll come right down to the wire. And it's like I said, it's going to be a grudge fest with two teams, where there's no love lost.
That's right. All right, Joe, let's move to the other side. And we have the real surprise Bengals coming off their win over the number one overall seed in the AFC, the Titans, taking on the Chiefs. And Joe, of course, the Chiefs are coming off a win in what might be the greatest NFL game ever against the Bills. And, I didn't know this, but actually the Bengals have beaten the Chiefs this year. And the last game they played, believe it or not, Joe Burrow threw for over 500 yards and 4 touchdowns. So I'm sure a lot of people right now are talking about how the Chiefs are going to beat up on the Bengals, and they don't really see the Bengals having much of a chance. But that is something that adds a little layer of intrigue to this. The Bengals did beat the Chiefs this year, and Joe Burrow had quite the game.
No, that's a good point. I'd actually forgotten about that. I think I remember that coming down to the Bengals getting like a late touchdown or a late field goal, something like that. Yeah, I mean, maybe the Bengals could keep it close. I feel like if you're Cincinnati, you approach this as pretty much a free shot. You're a year or two ahead. You have a golden opportunity to see if you can upset the Chiefs and make it to a Super Bowl. If you don't, good chance you'll, through the years have more opportunities with Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. On the flip side, I feel like there's, so much more pressure on Kansas City. Now that some of the other teams in the NFL, like the Packers and the Buccaneers, have gotten upset, they kind of look at this as the prohibited favorite to win the Super Bowl. The stat that I'm going to concentrate on was 2 of them. Number one, I don't expect Kansas City to commit as many turnovers as Tennessee did. And I don't expect, if Kansas City can get pressure on Burrow, I don't think he'll be able to overcome, that relentless pressure and, 5 or more sacks like he did last week. But lastly, I would say that I do trust Patrick Mahomes, with his heroics that we saw last week. And also the statistic I pay attention to is that when he faces quarterbacks not named Tom Brady, he's undefeated in the playoffs. He's 8-0 against quarterbacks not named Tom Brady. And so I think that bodes well also for Kansas City to be able to win this game.
Yeah, Joe, I think that this is a little too early for Joe Burrow. I think he's done excellent things, and what he's done getting the Bengals to this point is beyond admirable. It's incredible, actually. But you think about those franchises who were not quite there yet, but who probably succeeded more than you thought they would early on. Where do they usually go down? In the championship game. We talked about the Saints with Sean Payton about what he did early on. Where did that 2006 team go down? To the Bears in the NFC Championship game. They were getting there kind of early. They succeeded more than you thought they would early on, but eventually the team that's been cemented, that's built themselves to where they're supposed to be, is going to win, and usually this is where it's at. This Chiefs team didn't play their best game last week. They had terrible defensive output. Josh Allen looked like a superstar against them. And they were able to just pull off an amazing win because of what Mahomes and Kelsey and Tyreek Hill could do. And ultimately, the Bengals, the Chiefs don't have the same kind of defensive line the Bills had, but the Bengals' offensive line is truly pathetic. And it's going to cost them. And you're right, Mahomes isn't going to go out there and throw for 3 interceptions. Joe, I just talked about how people shouldn't probably look down the Bengals, but I'm going to go against my own advice here. I think that the Bengals are a great story, but this Chiefs team is just so much better than them. You're right. Mahomes doesn't lose to people that aren't Tom Brady. And I see this one being a game where maybe the Bengals hang around for about 2.5 quarters, but then I think Kansas City is really going to separate themselves and maybe see them win maybe 35-24, somewhere in that range.
No, that's actually precisely what I was thinking is the fact that Cincinnati will compete well in the first half. Maybe you see a couple of touchdowns from Burrow to either Chase or Higgins. But yeah, I think that over time, Kansas City will kind of assert their will. They have so much more playoff experience, and I think that they'll kind of coast in the second half to a championship.
Exactly what I think. Now, maybe next year, maybe Burrow does get into the Super Bowl next season, but it's just 1 year too early. And this is Mahomes' time to really supplant himself as the best player in the NFL. And I think you're going to see that again on Sunday.
I think it's also going to be important for if a team's going to unseat them in the AFC, they've got to get the home field advantage. And in the last 4 years, I think Kansas City has had the home field for this game.
And that's right. And Arrowhead Stadium is a much more difficult place to play than Nashville. Nashville, it's a cool city, but I don't really know that the Titans' home field advantage is worth a whole lot right now. You don't think about it in the same vein as going down to the Dome to play the Saints, going up to Seattle to play in the rain against the Seahawks, even going up to Lambeau. It doesn't really have that kind of thing yet. The Titans are still kind of new, and they haven't really developed, I think, that rabid of a fan base to have that much of a scary atmosphere. But the Chiefs they have one of the best atmospheres you have in all of the NFL. And it's almost more like a college aspect when you think about the way it goes down at Arrowhead Stadium. And that's going to be tough for Joe Burrow.
I think so.
All right. And when we talk about rabid fan bases in our next podcast, we're going to talk about Auburn basketball and their continued ascension under Bruce Pearl and that new number 1 ranking. And talking about number 1, if you want to keep tuning into our show, you can like us on Facebook and follow our Facebook fan page. Follow us on Twitter at DJ Sports Show. And, of course, you can find all of our episodes on Spotify. And we also have a new YouTube page where you can subscribe to that and watch our videos of our episodes. And as always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.